A love story so intense it turns into obsession, revenge, and heartbreak. Can true love survive betrayal, or does it destroy everyone in its path? Stay tuned to Filmy Review Hub as we uncover the story, hidden facts, and everything you need to know about Wuthering Heights 2026. Wuthering Heights is a 2026 romantic peer drama movie written, directed, and produced by Emerald Fennell. The film is inspired by Emily Bronte's classic 1847 novel, but instead of being a straight up remake, it gives the story a fresh and modern twist. Emerald Fennell wanted the movie to capture the same powerful emotions that a teenage girl might feel the very first time she reads the novel. The movie stars Margot Robbie as Catherine Earnshaw and Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. The supporting cast includes Hong Chau, Shazad Latif, Alison Oliver, Martin Clunes, and Ewan Mitchell, who all help bring this emotional and dramatic story to life. The movie had its world premiere at the Grauman's Chinese Theater in Los Angeles, California on January 28, 2026. A few weeks later, it officially hit theaters in both the United States and the United Kingdom on February 13, 2026, distributed by Warner Brothers Pictures. When it first dropped, critics had mixed opinions. Some people loved its bold new take on the classic story, while others felt it changed too much from the original novel. But one thing everybody agreed on was that the movie grabbed people's attention. Even with the mixed reviews, Wuthering Heights turned out to be a huge win at the box office. The movie was made with a production budget of around $80 million, but it ended up earning an impressive $242 million worldwide. That made it a major commercial success and proved that audiences were excited to see this fresh version of one of the most famous love stories ever written. Here is the rewritten version in simple, easy wording with a natural USA style flow. I also removed the Wikipedia reference and kept the story length almost the same. In 18th century England, Mr. Earnshaw comes back to his home, Wuthering Heights, after finding and rescuing a homeless young boy from the streets of Liverpool. He introduces the boy to his daughter, Kathy, and their housekeeper, Nellie Dean. Kathy quickly grows close to the boy, gives him the name Heathcliff, and treats him like family. As they grow up together, their friendship becomes incredibly strong, and they can't imagine life without each other. Years later, Kathy and Heathcliff are adults, but Wuthering Heights has fallen apart because Mr. Earnshaw has become an alcoholic and lost much of his money through gambling. Wanting a better future, Kathy decides to win the attention of their rich neighbor, Edgar Linton, a successful textile businessman. She believes marrying Edgar will help her escape her unhappy life and maybe even raise Heathcliff's place in society. Heathcliff hates the idea and becomes jealous. As time passes, both of them slowly realize they are deeply in love, even though Kathy tries to ignore her true feelings and continues pursuing Edgar one day. While secretly watching Edgar and his cousin Isabella, Kathy twists her ankle. Edgar brings her to his home, Thrushcross Grange, where she stays for 6 weeks to recover. During that time, Edgar falls in love with her and asks her to marry him, and she says yes. Later, Kathy admits to Nellie that she feels guilty for choosing Edgar instead of Heathcliff. She says nobody could understand how she feels. Hurt by Kathy's words, Nellie tricks her into saying that marrying Heathcliff would lower her social status, making sure Heathcliff secretly hears it from outside the room. Before Kathy can confess how much she truly loves him, Heathcliff leaves in heartbreak, believing she doesn't care about him. He rides away and disappears. The next day, Kathy realizes she made a terrible mistake and wants him back, but he's already gone. She refuses to believe he would leave her forever. A year passes, and after giving up hope that Heathcliff will return, Kathy finally marries Edgar. She moves into his beautiful mansion and enjoys a comfortable, wealthy life, but deep inside, she never stops thinking about Heathcliff. Eventually, she becomes pregnant with Edgar's child. Then, 5 years after disappearing, Heathcliff suddenly comes back. He's no longer poor. He is now wealthy, confident, and well dressed. Instead of forgiving Kathy, he's angry that she married Edgar. To make her jealous, he begins spending time with Isabella and even considers marrying her. Heathcliff also buys Wuthering Heights from Mr. Earnshaw, who dies soon afterward. Despite everything that's happened, Kathy and Heathcliff reconnect, and their old feelings quickly return. They secretly begin a passionate love affair. Later, Kathy discovers that Nellie knew Heathcliff had overheard their conversation years earlier and never told her. Furious, Kathy tries to throw Nellie out of the house. In revenge, Nellie tells Edgar about Kathy's secret relationship with Heathcliff. Edgar immediately forbids Kathy from ever seeing him again. Kathy later tells Heathcliff she's pregnant, and he says it doesn't change how he feels. He even offers to kill Edgar so they can be together, but Kathy refuses and pushes him away. Filled with anger, Heathcliff enters a cold and unhappy marriage with Isabella. Even though Isabella understands he's only using her to hurt Kathy, she still runs away with him. After they marry, Heathcliff treats Isabella cruelly and humiliates her, and Nellie witnesses how miserable her life has become. Heartbroken after Heathcliff marries Isabella, Kathy locks herself in her room and refuses to eat. Heathcliff secretly sends her love letters, hoping to stay connected, but Nellie hides every letter, making Kathy believe Heathcliff has completely forgotten about her. As her health gets worse, her pregnancy ends in a tragic miscarriage, and she becomes seriously ill from the infection. Realizing how close Kathy is to death, Nellie finally goes to Wuthering Heights to rescue Isabella and tell Heathcliff the truth. Heathcliff races to Thrushcross Grange on horseback, desperate to see Kathy one last time. But when he arrives, he's too late. Kathy has already died. Crushed with grief, Heathcliff holds her lifeless body in his arms and begs her spirit to haunt him forever, saying he'd rather live in madness than spend another day without her. Asterisk Margot Robbie as Cathy Earnshaw. Margot Robbie steps into the role of Catherine Earnshaw with a commanding presence that anchors Emerald Fennell's 2026 adaptation of Wuthering Heights. At 35 during filming, Robbie brings a mature intensity to a character who, in Emily Brontë's novel, navigates adolescence into adulthood amid the wild Yorkshire moors. Fennell's script reimagines Kathy as a woman whose passions burn with adult ferocity, torn between societal expectations and an all-consuming connection to Heathcliff. Robbie's portrayal emphasizes Kathy's duality, the wild moor-roaming girl who names the orphaned Heathcliff and forms an inseparable bond with him, evolving into a figure who strategically eyes marriage to Edgar Linton as a path to stability while her heart remains entangled in something far more primal. Critics have noted her stunning performance, highlighting how she conveys a woman torn between social expectation and wild desire. Her chemistry with Jacob Elordi crackles from their early scenes as young adults at the decaying Wuthering Heights estate. Robbie's career trajectory made her a natural, if age-adjusted, choice. Known for I, Tonya, Mary Queen of Scots, Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, and especially her star-making turn as Harley Quinn and producer role in Barbie, she embodies a big dick energy that Fennell explicitly sought for Kathy. Robbie herself expressed interest in the part after reading Fennell's script, leveraging her production company Lucky Chap Entertainment to co-produce alongside Fennell and Jose McNamara. This marks another collaboration following Promising Young Woman and Saltburn in the film. Kathy's arc unfolds with heightened sensuality and emotional volatility. After spraining her ankle spying on the Lintons, she spends weeks at Thrushcross Grange succumbing to Edgar's proposal. Robbie delivers layered monologues to Nellie Dean, revealing guilt, denial, and a profound internal conflict. One pivotal scene captures her confessing love for Heathcliff while simultaneously declaring that marrying him would degrade her, an utterance manipulated by Nellie and overheard by Heathcliff, triggering his departure later. As a married woman living in luxury yet secretly yearning for Heathcliff, Robbie portrays Kathy's pregnancy, affair, miscarriage, and decline with raw physicality. Her starvation and isolation in her room, intercepted love letters, and final reunion with the returned Heathcliff showcase her range. Reviewers praise how Robbie captures the novel's gothic intensity through modern carnal stylization, making Kathy's descent into madness and death viscerally affecting. Supporting her adult performance is Charlotte Mellington as young Kathy, making her screen debut. The younger actress handles the innocent yet fierce friendship with young Heathcliff effectively, establishing the foundational bond that drives the narrative. Mellington's scenes on the moors, full of playful energy and protectiveness toward the rescued boy, provide a tender contrast to the adult turmoil. Robbie's casting drew some criticism for aging up the character and deviating from descriptions of Kathy's brown ringlets and youthful wildness, but her star power and commitment elevate the material. Fennell defended the choice by noting the need for supersized star power to match the character's outsized personality. Robbie's preparation included deep dives into the source material and prior adaptations, studying performances by Merle Oberon and others while infusing her own interpretation. Her work contributes significantly to the film's box office success, grossing over $241 million worldwide throughout. Robbie's Kathy is both victim and architect of the tragedy. Her interactions with supporting characters, clashing with Mr. Earnshaw, confiding in Nellie, and navigating the Linton siblings, add depth. The film's emphasis on carnality amplifies her physical and emotional entanglement with Elordi's Heathcliff, featuring intense romantic and sexual sequences that push period drama boundaries. Asterisk Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff. Jacob Elordi embodies Heathcliff with a brooding magnetism that captures the character's Byronic essence while adapting to Fennell's vision of a tortured antihero. Cast without audition after Fennell spotted him on the Saltburn set, Elordi, then contemplating a hiatus, brings youthful energy and mysterious aura to the role. At 28, he portrays the adult Heathcliff opposite Robbie, with Owen Cooper handling the younger years. Heathcliff's journey begins as a street urchin rescued by Mr. Earnshaw, named by Cathy, and growing up in servitude at Wuthering Heights. Elordi's performance traces his transformation from protective companion to jealous rival, vengeful returnee, and ultimately broken figure. His initial bond with young Cathy is marked by inseparability on the moors. As adults, jealousy erupts when Cathy pursues Edgar Linton. Elordi's Heathcliff disapproves, his dark stares and tense confrontations conveying deep insecurity rooted in class and outsider status. The overheard conversation scene is pivotal. Elordi conveys heartbreak and rage as he flees into the sunset on horseback. His return years later, wealthy, groomed, and bitter, marks a shift. Elordi layers menace and lingering passion into interactions with Cathy, pursuing a calculated relationship with Isabella Linton for revenge. The film depicts his loveless BDSM-tinged marriage to Isabella, where he degrades her, witnessed by Nellie. Elordi's physicality and intensity shine in these darker sequences. Controversy surrounded Elordi's casting due to Heathcliff's description in the novel as a dark-skinned gypsy with racially ambiguous origins. Critics accused the production of whitewashing, but Fennell defended it by referencing the first book's illustration that inspired her and focusing on the sadomasochistic primal elements rather than strict historical fidelity. Elordi himself noted the inverted commas around the title signal a reinterpretation, Elordi's prior roles in Euphoria as Nate, Saltburn, Priscilla. And his Oscar-nominated turn as Frankenstein's monster prepared him for this complex anti-hero. His chemistry with Robbie drives the film's emotional core, with scenes of reconnection and affair marked by intoxicating passion. The final moments, where he holds Cathy's body and begs her spirit to haunt him, deliver powerful catharsis. Young Heathcliff, played by Owen Cooper, acclaimed for adolescence, establishes the character's early vulnerability and resilience. Cooper's scenes with Mellington capture the adoptive family's tensions, particularly under Mr. Earnshaw's increasingly rough treatment. Elordi's contribution helps the film achieve commercial success despite mixed reviews. His portrayal balances romantic idealization with vengeful cruelty, making Heathcliff a figure of both sympathy and horror. Hong Chau as Nellie Dean. Hong Chau delivers a nuanced, expanded take on Nellie Dean, the housemaid and key observer. In Bronte's novel, Nellie serves as primary narrator. Here, Fennell gives her a richer backstory and agency, making her more active in the tragedy. Chau, Oscar-nominated for The Whale, brings subtlety and quiet strength to the role. Alongside Vi Nguyen as young Nellie, Nellie witnesses the Earnshaw household's decline, Cathy's bond with Heathcliff, and the ensuing chaos. Chau's performance highlights Nellie's loyalty mixed with resentment. The manipulation scene, provoking Cathy to say marrying Heathcliff would degrade her, is masterfully understated, revealing Nellie's bitterness after Cathy's dismissive comment about her never having been loved. Later, Nellie's role grows complex. She reveals the affair to Edgar, intercepts letters, and ultimately aids in the climax by informing Heathcliff of Cathy's dying state. Chau portrays these moral ambiguities with empathy, avoiding caricature. Her interactions with the leads ground the gothic elements in human observation. Chau's casting represents color-conscious choices in supporting roles. sparking discussion alongside other diverse elements. Her filmography equips her for this pivotal supporting turn. Young V. Nguyen complements her in establishing Nelly's early position in the household. Shahzad Latif as Edgar Linton. Shahzad Latif portrays Edgar Linton as the polished, wealthy contrast to Heathcliff's wildness. As Kathy Suitor, an eventual husband, Latif conveys genuine affection undercut by insecurity and class privilege. His Edgar proposes during Kathy's recovery at Thrushcross Grange, offering escape and stability. Latif's performance shines in the rivalry, especially after learning of the affair. He forbids contact, embodying civilized restraint against Heathcliff's fury, known for Star Trek, Discovery, Penny Dreadful, and Toast of London. Latif adds layers of decency and frustration. His Edgar is not merely a foil but a man whose world unravels through Cathy's passions. Alison Oliver as Isabella Linton. Alison Oliver, a Saltburn collaborator with Fennell, plays Isabella with a mix of adoration and tragic disillusionment. As Edgar's sister, she becomes Heathcliff's vengeful match after his return. Oliver depicts Isabella's initial infatuation turning to horror as Heathcliff degrades her in their marriage, treating her harshly in scenes witnessed by Nellie. Oliver's work in Conversations with Friends and The Order informs her ability to portray vulnerability and resilience. Her arc underscores themes of manipulation and gendered power dynamics in the story. Asterisk Martin Clunes as Mr. Earnshaw. Martin Clunes brings gravitas and decline to Mr. Earnshaw, Cathy's father, who adopts Heathcliff but later treats him roughly amid alcoholism and gambling. Clunes, beloved for Doc Martin and British comedies, humanizes the patriarch's flaws, showing initial kindness giving way to neglect that accelerates Wuthering Heights' decay. His performance sets the tone for the household's dysfunction, influencing the younger generation's traumas. Clunes' everyman quality adds relatability to the Gothic framework. Ewan Mitchell as Joseph. Ewan Mitchell plays the cantankerous servant Joseph with gruff authenticity. Joseph's long service and moralizing presence provide continuity and comic dark relief amid the drama. Mitchell's intense screen presence fits the role's dour Yorkshire character. As the supporting ensemble and young cast, the ensemble rounds out the world with actors filling the moors and estates with lived-in detail. The young performers Charlotte Mellington, Owen Cook, Y. Nguyen effectively launched the central relationships, bridging childhood innocence to adult destruction. Casting director Carmel Cochran faced scrutiny over choices, defending the vision against fidelity demands. Fennell's approach prioritized emotional truth and star power over literalism, resulting in a visually vibrant carnal reinterpretation. Diverse supporting casting provoked debate on representation in period pieces. Fennell's influences inform the heightened, subversive casting that challenges genre conventions. The film's success, despite mixed critical reception, validates the bold ensemble in delivering a provocative take on Bronte's classic. This casting ensemble drives the narrative's exploration of love, class, revenge, and madness. Each actor contributes to the tapestry, making Fennell's Wuthering Heights a distinct cinematic event that sparks conversation long after viewing. The interplay of established stars and fresh faces creates dynamic tensions mirroring the story's conflicts. Expanding on Robbie and Elordi's central pairing, their off-screen rapport from Saltburn translates into on-screen fire. Scenes of more roms, jealous confrontations, and clandestine reunions are charged with physicality. Robbie's Kathy evolves from impulsive youth to calculating adult, her pregnancy and miscarriage scenes demanding physical commitment that Robbie delivers with depth. Elordi's Heathcliff mirrors this, his return marked by calculated elegance masking seething resentment, culminating in haunting final acts. Supporting roles amplify these dynamics. Nellie acts as moral compass and catalyst, her expanded agency adding feminist undertones. Edgar represents societal order, his composure cracking under pressure. Isabella embodies the collateral damage of obsessive love, her degradation scenes underscoring Heathcliff's capacity for cruelty. Mr. Earnshaw establishes patriarchal failure, while Joseph voices traditional judgment. The young cast's authenticity grounds the origins. Their chemistry sells the profound childhood connection that persists as destructive adult force. Overall, the casting reflects Fennell's intent to evoke the visceral impact of first reading the novel, a teenage rush of forbidden passion, jealousy, and tragedy through contemporary lenses. Debates over age, race, and fidelity underscore the adaptation's cultural resonance. The ensemble's performances, combined with the soundtrack, create an immersive experience that propel the film to strong box office returns. Further analysis of performance techniques reveals deliberate choices. Robbie employed method like immersion, spending time on Yorkshire locations to embody Kathy's Moore connection. Elordi drew on personal experiences of intensity for Heathcliff's volatility. These efforts result in a cohesive yet explosive cast dynamic. In supporting capacities, actors add layers to Heathcliff's mysterious origins. The full ensemble populates a believable 19th century world that contrasts with the protagonist's emotional extremes. This comprehensive approach ensures the casting serves both spectacle and substance, making the 2026 Wuthering Heights a memorable reinterpretation. The article explores the casting decisions in depth, examining how each actor interprets their character, the production context, audience reception, and contributions to the overall film. Robbie and Elordi form the passionate core, their performances fueling the story's emotional and physical intensity across key plot points. The childhood adoption, teenage friendship turning romantic, the proposal and betrayal, Heathcliff's disappearance and wealthy return, the affair, marriage's decline and tragic conclusion. Robbie brings star charisma and emotional range to Kathy, making her both sympathetic and frustratingly human. Her scenes of longing, rage, and physical decline are highlights. Elordi matches this with a brooding, magnetic presence that makes Heathcliff's darkness compelling. Together, they create undeniable on-screen heat that defines the adaptation's bold, carnal style. Chau's Nellie provides narrative grounding and moral complexity, often acting as the audience's surrogate while influencing events. Latif's Edgar offers a counterpoint of refinement and restraint. Oliver's Isabella adds layers of innocence corrupted. Clunes and Mitchell bring experienced British character acting that enriches the period atmosphere. The younger actors effectively set up the central mythos, ensuring the adult drama feels earned. Controversies around age, appearance, and diversity added to the film's cultural footprint, generating pre-release buzz that contributed to its commercial performance. Fennell's casting choices prioritize contemporary appeal and thematic resonance over strict book accuracy, resulting in a version that feels fresh and provocative. The ensemble work elevates the screenplay, cinematography, and music into a cohesive whole that reintroduces Wuthering Heights to new generations while honoring its enduring power. This detailed breakdown covers the primary cast members, their character arcs, preparation, on-screen contributions, and surrounding discussions, providing a comprehensive look at how the 2026 film's casting shapes its identity and impact. The performances collectively capture the novel's spirit of destructive passion in a modern cinematic package. Production, development, and pre-production of the project began to take shape in the summer of 2024 when writer-director Emerald Fennell revealed that she intended to pen and helm a new big-screen version of Emily Bronte's 1847 novel Wuthering Heights. Fennell had already built a reputation as one of British cinema's most provocative young filmmakers, having broken through with the Oscar-winning Promising Young Woman in 2020 and followed it with the divisive class satire Saltburn in 2023. Taking on Bronte's gothic romance represented a natural next step for a director drawn to stories about obsession, cruelty, and desire operating beneath a veneer of respectability. Casting news followed only a couple of months later. In September 2024, it was confirmed that Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi would play the novel's central pair, Catherine Earnshaw and Heathcliff. Robbie's involvement extended well beyond acting. She came on as a producer through her banner Lucky Chap Entertainment, working alongside the financing and production company MRC. The pairing of Robbie and Fennell was already a proven one. Robbie had produced Fennell's two previous features, and Elordi had starred opposite Barry Keoghan in Fennell's Saltburn, giving the new project a sense of continuity within this creative circle. Fennell was candid from early on that she had no interest in delivering a page-for-page retelling of Bronte's novel. Rather than aiming for literal faithfulness, She described her goal as trying to capture the sensation of encountering the book as a teenage girl reading it for the very first time, an emotional and visceral target rather than a literary one. This philosophy would go on to shape virtually every subsequent decision about tone, structure, and content. The path to a distributor was more dramatic than is typical for a literary adaptation. A bidding war broke out in October 2024, with Netflix reportedly offering as much as $150 million to acquire distribution rights. Despite the much larger sum on the table, Warner Brothers Pictures ultimately secured the film for a considerably smaller $80 million. The deciding factor was not money, but strategy. Warner Brothers already had a first look arrangement with Lucky Chap, the same relationship that had produced Barbie in 2023, and was willing to commit to precisely what Fennell and Robbie wanted: a full theatrical release backed by a substantial marketing push rather than a streaming first rollout. Jacob Elordi's casting carried its own behind the scenes story. By his own account, he had been weighing a step back from acting altogether before Fennell approached him directly with the role, allowing him to take the part without a traditional audition process. His casting, however, also ignited public debate. Heathcliff is famously described in Bronte's text in racially ambiguous terms, at various points characterized as a dark-skinned gypsy or as a Lascar, and the choice to cast a white actor in the part drew criticism upon the casting announcement. Commentators pointed out that the novel itself is deliberately vague about Heathcliff's origins, floating the possibility of a China princess as his mother in one passage and referring to him as a Spanish castaway in another, a deliberate ambiguity many readers interpret as Brontë underlining the isolation and insularity of the Yorkshire Moors community rather than pinning down a specific ethnicity for her Byronic antihero. Nearly a year later, in September 2025, Fennell addressed the controversy directly, defending Elordi, an actor of Basque heritage, by explaining that he bore a striking resemblance to an illustration of Heathcliff from the edition of the novel she read as a child. The supporting cast filled out through the rest of 2024 and into 2025. Hong Chau, Alison Oliver, and Shazad Latif all joined the production in November 2024, taking on the roles of Nellie Dean, Isabella Linton, and Edgar Linton, respectively. Oliver's presence marked another reunion with Fennell, having appeared previously in Saltburn. The following March, 3 newcomers were announced for the film's flashback sequences depicting the central characters as children: Charlotte Mellington as young Kathy, Owen Cooper as young Heathcliff, and Wai Nguyen as young Nellie, all making their feature film debuts in the production. Filming principal photography ran for 50 days, beginning in mid-January 2025 and wrapping in late March of that year, entirely on location and on sound stages within the United Kingdom. Cinematography was handled by the Swedish-born Linus Sandgren, marking his second consecutive collaboration with Fennell following his work on Saltburn. For this project, Sandgren shot on a combination of 35mm and VistaVision film stock, favoring a classical tactile approach to image making over digital capture. The film was ultimately framed in the 1:8:1 aspect ratio, achieved primarily through 3-perf 35mm Arton Penelope cameras, which handled the bulk of the dialogue and character work, supplemented by a pair of 8-perf VistaVision cameras from Beaumont, which were reserved for sweeping wide shots and landscape photography, a format choice well suited to capturing the vastness of the moorland setting. The production soundstage work took place at Sky Studios Elstree, one of the newer large-scale studio facilities in the London area. For location shooting, the production travelled north to the Yorkshire Dales, filming across the valleys of Arkengarthdale and Swaldale, in and around the village of Loro, and within the boundaries of the Yorkshire Dales National Park itself, terrain that closely mirrors the wild, windswept setting Brontë described in her original novel and lends the film a sense of geographic authenticity. Filming was not without incident. During the first week of the shoot, Jacob Elordi suffered an accidental injury when he backed into an overheated brass shower fixture, resulting in a second-degree burn that required a hospital visit. The mishap occurred early enough in production that it became a talking point in press coverage once the film was released, particularly after Elordi later remarked publicly that he had also given himself deliberate scarring effects for a scene in the film, a comment that context made his real injury feel like something of a strange echo. Post-production editing duties on the film were handled by Victoria Boydell, who was tasked with assembling Sandgren's film shot footage into the finished 136-minute runtime. As with much of the production, the post-production phase was oriented around preserving the tactile, classical film qualities established during the shoot rather than layering on extensive digital polish. In keeping with Fennell's overall aesthetic ambitions for a story rooted in physical embodied passion rather than spectacle, music the film's score was composed by Anthony Willis, continuing his creative partnership with Fennell after having previously scored Saltburn. Alongside the orchestral score, the production commissioned an entire album of original songs from pop musician Charlie XCX, giving the film a hybrid soundtrack that paired traditional underscoring with a contemporary song cycle explicitly tied to the film's title and themes. The rollout of that music began well ahead of the film's theatrical release. The lead single, House, featuring Welsh musician John Cale, arrived on November 10, 2025, accompanied by a music video directed by Mitch Ryan. A second track, Chains of Love, followed just 3 days later on November 13, timed to coincide with the release of the film's theatrical trailer, in which the song was also prominently featured. Two additional singles rounded out the promotional campaign, Wall of Sound on January 16, 2026, and Always Everywhere, which arrived on February 13, 2026, the same day as both the full album and the film's wide theatrical release, tying the music and film campaigns together as a single coordinated event. Fennell has also spoken about the broader stylistic and tonal influences she drew on while shaping the film. In preparing to write and direct the adaptation, she revisited a personal list of favorite love stories, specifically ones she felt had challenged, subverted, or even dismantled the conventions typical of the romance genre. The films she cited by name span nearly a century of cinema. Random Harvest 1942, A Matter of Life and Death 1946, Far From the Madding Crowd 1967, Donkey Skin 1970, The Night Porter 1974, Bram Stoker's Dracula 1992, Crash 1996, Romeo plus Juliet 1996, The End of the Affair 1999, Romance 1999, Bluebeard 2009, The Handmaiden 2016, and The Beguiled 2017, a list that signals an interest in romance stories that lean into transgression, artifice, obsession, and heightened style rather than conventional sentimentality. The marketing rollout leaned into this same sensibility visually. The first trailer and poster arrived online on September 3, 2025, preceded by promotional billboards that appeared in major cities including New York, London, and Los Angeles. The poster design consciously echoed the iconic imagery of Gone with the Wind, 1939. The distinctive title lettering used throughout the campaign was created by Chips, a Brooklyn-based design studio, and was itself modeled on the poster of a much earlier adaptation, the 1920 silent film version of Wuthering Heights starring Milton Rosmer. One recurring detail across the marketing and the film's own presentation is its title, which is consistently stylized with quotation marks around it, Wuthering Heights. Fennell explained this choice as a deliberate acknowledgement that no film adaptation of such a dense and difficult novel could ever claim to be the book itself. Putting the title in quotation marks was her way of signaling that what audiences would see was her version, a variation on the source material rather than a direct translation of it. In the lead up to release, the film stars also received a significant publicity boost when Robbie and Elordi were announced as the cover subjects for Vogue Australia's February 2026 issue, timed just weeks ahead of the theatrical opening. Released theatrical Wuthering Heights had its world premiere at the historic Grauman's Chinese Theatre in Los Angeles on January 28, 2026. The wider theatrical rollout followed roughly 2 weeks later with Warner Brothers Pictures releasing the film in both the United States and the United Kingdom on February 13, 2026, deliberately positioned as the eve of Valentine's Day, aligning the romantic subject matter with the calendar. The film was also made available in IMAX theaters as part of its theatrical run, offering audiences a large format presentation suited to Sandgren's widescreen VistaVision photography. In North America, The film opened during a competitive 4-day frame, sharing the marketplace with three other new releases: Crime 101, Good Luck, Have Fun, Don't Die, and Goat. Ahead of release, industry trackers projected an opening in the range of $50 million to $55 million from roughly 3,600 theaters over the 4-day President's Day weekend. The film's actual performance landed short of that target. It earned $11 million on its first day of release, a figure that included $3 million generated from Thursday preview screenings. Over the full 4-day holiday weekend, it accumulated $37.5 million domestically, which was enough to claim the top spot at the box office for the frame, but still came in below the pre-release estimates. In its second weekend in theaters, the film's domestic gross dropped to $14.2 million, and it slipped to second place, overtaken by fellow new release Goat. At that point in its run, cumulative worldwide earnings stood at approximately $152 million. Home media: the film transitioned to digital streaming platforms on March 31, 2026, roughly 6 weeks after its theatrical bow. A physical media release followed a little over a month later, with the film arriving on 4K Ultra HD Blu-ray, standard Blu-ray, and DVD on May 5, 2026, completing its rollout across the major home viewing formats. Reception box office: Wuthering Heights carried a reported production budget of $80 million. As of the most recent available reporting in April 2026, the film had accumulated a worldwide gross of roughly $241 to $241.7 million, split between $84 million earned in the United States and Canada and approximately $157. $3 million generated across international markets. That result was enough for the film to be counted among the year's biggest earners, placing it as the fifth highest grossing film of 2026 globally at that point in the year, a strong outcome for what was, at its core, a literary period drama rather than a franchise tentpole, suggesting that the starring pairing of Robbie and Elordi, combined with an aggressive and stylish marketing campaign, was able to draw sizable audiences into theaters despite reviews that were far from uniformly positive. Critical reaction to the film settled into a distinctly mixed consensus rather than a clear verdict in either direction. On the aggregation site, Rotten Tomatoes, 58% of 337 critics' reviews were recorded as positive, with the site's consensus summary describing the film as a loose, carnality-heavy, visually striking adaptation that may fall short of high literature but succeeds as a vibrant visual experience. Metacritic, which calculates a weighted average score rather than a simple positive-negative split, gave the film a rating of 55 out of 100 based on 59 critics, a score the site itself categorizes as mixed or average. Ticket-buying audiences responded somewhat more warmly than critics on balance, with polling firm CinemaScore recording an average grade of B on its A+ to F scale. Individual reviews illustrated just how divided critical opinion was. David Sims, writing for The Atlantic, embraced the film's heightened sensuality, characterizing it as an energetically physical and enjoyable ride. Peter Bradshaw of The Guardian took the opposite view, describing the film as emotionally empty despite its overt sensuality, dismissing it essentially as all surface and no substance. Mick LaSalle of the San Francisco Chronicle offered a more analytical critique, arguing that by giving Kathy and Heathcliff an overtly active sexual relationship, Fennell inadvertently undercut the story's central tension, since a physically consummated romance has nowhere further to escalate within the framework of Wuthering Heights. In his reading, the choice traded away the novel's power of unfulfilled longing without gaining anything meaningful in return. Barry Hertz, writing in the Globe and Mail, was similarly unconvinced, suggesting that no amount of carefully composed food and production imagery could compensate for weaknesses elsewhere in the film, including in the performances of its drenched, rain-soaked leads. Other critics focused less on tone and more on the film's relationship to its source text. Sarah Chihaya, writing for The Nation, argued that the adaptation largely sidestepped the novel's genuine engagement with questions of class, race, and inheritance, concerns she felt were central to Bronte's original but diminished in Fennell's retelling. On the more favorable end of the spectrum, Karen James of the BBC praised the film's willingness to take risks, noting its comic detours and moments of excess, but concluding that its ambition justified those indulgences. In her assessment, Whatever liberties Fennell took with the novel's details, the film still managed to capture the enduring class bound passion at the heart of the original story. Taken together, the range of critical response, from enthusiastic embrace of its sensuality to sharp dismissal of its emotional hollowness to more measured appreciation of its ambition, left Wuthering Heights positioned as one of the more talked about and debated literary adaptations of its release year, even as its box office performance proved that public curiosity about the film outpaced any critical consensus on its merits. Reviews number one classic lovers everywhere are celebrating and condemning the upcoming release of the new Wuthering Heights movie, directed Wuthering Heights Fennell, who has previously directed other hit films like Saltburn and Anna Karenina. Wuthering Heights, which is a movie based on the classic novel Wuthering Heights by Emily Brontë, is slated to release in theaters on February 13th. The book takes place in the late 18th to early 19th centuries and follows Heathcliff, a dark-skinned orphan who becomes romantically entangled with a wealthy white woman, Catherine Earnshaw. The controversy around the movie centers mostly on its casting. Actor Jacob Elordi, who recently starred in another Gothic novel adaptation, Guillermo del Toro's Frankenstein 2025, was cast as Heathcliff. Within the novel, the character of Heathcliff is described as a dark-skinned gypsy, Wuthering Heights Chapter 1, but Jacob Elordi is a white man. Many people believe that Heathcliff's race is essential to his character, which is why they think it is important that it is accurately represented, because it makes sense of the character's actions and traits within the novel. An Instagram user's comment with over 2,000 likes states, "This is one of my favorite books. Heathcliff is repeatedly called a dark gypsy. Kathy literally says he looks like a prince from India. His whole character arc is based on the bad treatment he gets because he's not white." Another criticism of the casting comes from the popularity of the two main actors, with some people expressing fatigue at seeing the same people appearing in movies. An additional Instagram comment states, "Do they ever hire anyone else? I mean, they're great, but for goodness sake, there are millions of actors out here." With this romantic movie set to release the day before Valentine's Day, it is expected to do well in theaters globally, especially within its opening weekend. Number two movie review, Catherine and Heathcliff have been in love since they were children, ever since Kathy's father brought the orphan boy home to be her pet. But love wasn't enough to keep them together. Kathy's father gambled away everything they owned, everything but Wuthering Heights, their home in the English moors. Kathy worries that if she marries a destitute Heathcliff, they'll be paupers. Still, she wonders if their love might be worth it anyway. Unfortunately, Heathcliff doesn't know that. When he overhears Catherine discuss her situation with her companion, Nellie, all he catches is that Kathy would be degraded by marrying him. So Heathcliff leaves without saying goodbye, determined to make his way in the world and return to Catherine a more worthy man. Unfortunately, Catherine doesn't know that. So she marries someone else, someone who can take care of her and her dilapidated father. When Heathcliff returns, years later, Kathy is pregnant with her husband's child. She's built a stable life with him, and that should be the end of it. Heathcliff and Kathy should move on with their lives and be happy for one another. Instead, they allow jealousy, spite, and selfishness to drive them, engaging in a raucous extramarital affair that can only end in tragedy. Because if they can't have each other, then they might as well make themselves and everyone around them miserable. Pasic elements. Catherine eventually marries a man named Edgar who obviously loves her. And even after he learns that Catherine's having an affair with Heathcliff, his love holds strong. When Heathcliff is first brought to Wuthering Heights, Catherine is told he'll be her pet, and she indeed treats him as such for a while. But eventually their relationship blossoms into a more meaningful friendship, and Heathcliff tells Kathy that he would endure any torture to spare her pain. Nellie, Catherine's companion, essentially a hired friend, refuses to entertain Kathy's more selfish whims. She frequently holds her accountable in an attempt to temper Kathy's immature outbursts. Her sternness is perhaps ill-advised at times, and some of her actions are certainly self-serving, but she really does seem to have Kathy's best interest at heart. Spiritual elements at one point. Catherine randomly says that she'd be miserable if she were in heaven, to which Nellie responds that Catherine isn't fit to go there. Someone mentions being damned after beginning an extramarital affair. We see crosses on necklaces and graves. Catherine wears several large, garish, bejeweled crosses as brooches. A nun scolds some boys at a public hanging for mocking the dying man. The prayer, "If I should die before I wake," is embroidered on a blanket. Someone reads from Matthew 11 at a funeral, "Sexual and romantic content, there's no nudity, but this film contains a veritable montage of clothed but intensely sensual sex scenes." Oh, and they're all carried out by a married and pregnant Catherine with Heathcliff. But more on that in a moment. Joseph and Zillah, two servants in the Earnshaw Catherine's family household, have sex in the barn one night. Their encounter is masochistic in nature, and Joseph puts a horse's bridle on Zillah's head. Kathy, who up to this point in her life has never experienced anything sexual, sees the beginning of this encounter from the loft above through a gap in the floorboards. But Heathcliff covers her eyes and mouth to keep her from seeing or making noise, lying on top of back as he does so. Still, we hear and see a few flashes of everything Joseph and Zillah are doing the next day. Aroused by what she saw the night before, Kathy brings herself to climax out on the moors. Heathcliff spots her and, foregoing all further attempts at innocence, licks the hand she used on herself. The couple doesn't see each other for a while after that due to a misunderstanding. Catherine marries her wealthy neighbor Edgar in Heathcliff's absence. We see Kathy and Edgar have sex a couple of times, and it's implied that it's a regular part of their marital activities, albeit one that Catherine doesn't seem to take much pleasure in. When Kathy isn't pregnant a year into her marriage, her father mocks her, implying that her husband might be sterile. Eventually, the couple does conceive, and when Edgar hears the news, he delightedly insists on letting his wife rest in her own bed, since she wouldn't get much sleep if she shared his. When Heathcliff returns, he and Kathy begin their affair, and we see them having sex repeatedly. When he learns about Catherine's pregnancy, he turns it darkly sexual, and Kathy plays along, aroused by Heathcliff's jealousy and spurring it along. Elsewhere, Kathy presumably pictures Heathcliff while having sex with her husband, making him cover her eyes and mouth as Heathcliff did in the barn. Isabella, Edgar's ward, falls in love with Heathcliff. And both Heathcliff and Catherine use this information to spurn each other. When Kathy eventually rejects him, Heathcliff goes to Isabella's room to seduce her. He undresses Isabella off screen, and we don't see it, but it's implied they have sex. We later see more instances of Heathcliff roughly beginning to undress Isabella before the camera cuts away. A man is hanged, and the film sexualizes his death as he gasps for air, a bag over his head. Some young boys present at the public hanging note that he has an erection as he passes. Afterward, we see one couple making out and another clearly engaging in sexual activity beneath their clothes. Someone later wonders if a woman will be hanged in her skirts, which would be indecent. Women wear corseted dresses that boost their cleavage, and more than once the camera lingers on their chests as they breathe heavily. A woman purposely pulls her dress sleeves off her shoulders in a seductive manner. We see Heathcliff shirtless on several occasions, the scenes often purposely sexualized. Isabella makes a pop-up memory book for Catherine. One of the images is a rose that looks like female genitalia. Another is a mushroom with a particularly long stalk that resembles male genitalia. A young Heathcliff and Kathy lay next to each other in a bed one night, and Heathcliff rolls over to wrap his arm around Catherine's waist. A maid in the Earnshaw household mocks Nellie, calling the girl a beatard whose father paid to have her hidden away with the Earnshaws. Violent content after a man is publicly hanged. Onlookers celebrate and cheer, many including a young Catherine, enthralled by the spectacle. Peddlers sell dolls with nooses, others put on a marionette reenactment. We later hear that a woman will be hanged. A young Heathcliff is brutally manhandled by someone who may or may not be his father. Heathcliff himself never tells. The movie strongly suggests that Catherine's father is physically abusive to his daughter and his staff. He's certainly verbally abusive toward them. In one scene, he holds a man in a headlock with one arm while holding a woman in headlock with the other. Heathcliff and Catherine, at a time when the two were just friends, arrive home late one evening due to a heavy rainfall. Heathcliff takes the blame for their tardiness to spare Cathy her father's wrath, and Mr. Earnshaw is indeed incited to violence. Heathcliff orders Nellie to take Catherine away as Earnshaw charges. Nellie obeys, holding back Cathy as the girl sobs over her friend's fate. We hear Earnshaw beating young Heathcliff through the door, and later we see blood seeping through Heathcliff's shirt where he was whipped. As an adult, scars still cover Heathcliff's back from where he was struck as a child. Catherine occasionally punches Heathcliff, but never hard enough to cause real damage. Several different characters throw and break objects in anger. After carrying on their affair for quite some time, Heathcliff gets turned on while talking about killing Edgar, and this frightens Cathy when she realizes he's being serious. She ends their affair for her husband's sake. Heathcliff's sexual encounters seem rough and almost violent. Heathcliff then marries Isabella, a ploy to make Cathy jealous. When he first approaches Isabella, he essentially tells her that he'll be abusive and neglectful toward her since he's really in love with Cathy, but Isabella, perhaps too excited by the prospect of being with Heathcliff to realize that he means what he's saying, acquiesces. We don't see the newlyweds having sex, but each lead up to sex becomes more violent than the last. Heathcliff encourages a male servant to watch them during one encounter. Heathcliff manipulates Isabella's affections, eventually chaining her up like a dog on all fours and forcing her to literally bark and pant at his feet. The poor woman knows that Heathcliff is being horrible to her, but she's too besotted to seek help. A woman neglects to care for herself while pregnant due to depression. Though it's implied that some of her behavior is a grab for attention, her refusal to even eat eventually leads to a miscarriage. And because the baby doesn't pass naturally, she develops sepsis. She eventually succumbs to the infection, and when she dies, she bleeds out from her womb, every ounce of blood in her body seemingly pouring out at once. Catherine asks Nellie to lace her corset tighter and tighter in one scene. Nellie warns Cathy that she won't be able to breathe, but Cathy insists, and sure enough, Cathy has lesions on her skin from the laces later that evening. In another scene, Isabella meticulously drives a needle into her palm. At one point, Heathcliff tells Catherine he would cut his own throat if he truly believed she didn't care for him. Catherine then tells him he should do it. Someone cradles a woman's blood-drained and lifeless corpse. A woman recounts all the deaths that occur in Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. We hear someone sprained her ankle. Someone kicks a corpse in anger and is later praised for showing restraint by only doing it twice. Isabella owns a large dollhouse complete with dolls of herself and Catherine. When Catherine angers her, she poses the dolls in a gruesome death scene wherein her doll stabs Cathy's in the back with a knife. Elsewhere, Cathy roughly grabs Isabella by the hair in anger. We hear a pig screeching as it's being slaughtered. It's paired with a splash of blood on the wall. And later we see the pig hanging from a rafter as servants drain the creature of blood. There are 6 uses of the F word. We also hear instances of a-hole, beatard, beache, and dn. God's name is frequently taken in vain. Mr. Earnshaw is a drunkard, and his household frequently comments on his drinking habits. He eventually dies from this. We see his body lying between 2 towering piles of empty bottles, and vomit smears the floor near him. Heathcliff smokes a pipe in one scene. Other noteworthy elements: Catherine and Heathcliff are verbally abusive to each other, frequently yelling. They are also verbally abusive to the people around them, often saying cruel things. Cathy is spoiled, entitled, selfish, and prone to dramatic outbursts. She and Heathcliff both act poorly out of envy and spite, both too proud to apologize or admit their true feelings for each other. Nellie, well acquainted with Cathy's immaturity, often rolls her eyes at the woman and offers retorts with harsh words. Mr. Earnshaw boasts about saving Heathcliff from an abusive guardian, but he himself is abusive to the boy. We learn he gambled away his family's fortune, leaving Catherine with nothing. Once married to Edgar, Cathy sends her father money regularly, but he gambles that away too. People lie. A dog uses the bathroom inside after its owner leaves it locked in a room. Someone uses leeches as a medical treatment. Conclusion: based on the greatest love story of all time, that's what the trailer for director Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights boldly declares. Well, no offense to Miss Fennell, Miss Brontë, the author of the 1847 eponymous novel, or any of the other creators of this film adaptation, but the story of Catherine and Heathcliff is not the greatest love story of all time, not even close. If you've read the book, then you know that Catherine and Heathcliff are each too proud for their own good. They are also incredibly abusive to each other, verbally and sometimes even physically. And that cycle of abuse carries over to their respective children too. In this movie, that abuse is toned down, and neither of them has a child either. So we're at least spared those troubling depictions of child abuse. But the film is troubled all the same. We do witness plenty of domestic abuse. As a child, Heathcliff is beaten by Catherine's father. As an adult, he is abusive to his own wife. Heathcliff and Catherine frequently bandy about insults even as they carry on their extramarital affair, an affair that the film relishes to depict. We don't see any nudity in Wuthering Heights, but even clothed leads Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi put on quite the steamy show. Furthermore, the movie takes a departure from the book in the manner of Catherine's pregnancy. In the movie, Catherine's poor choices result in a miscarriage, and she dies from sepsis shortly after, whereas Emily Brontë's Catherine merely goes into early labor and dies shortly after her daughter is born. And unfortunately, that means unwitting viewers of the film version will be treated to a horrific miscarriage scene. Oh, and one other big book difference here, the swearing. Emily Brontë and her sisters never once used the F word in their novels, but apparently Fennell thought that's just what this adaptation needed. Visually, this is a stunning movie. Musically, it adds a modern beat that conveys emotion well. But those are pretty much the only nice things I have to say about 2026's Wuthering Heights. Emily studied film and writing when she was in college, and when she isn't being way too competitive while playing board games, she enjoys food, sleep, and geeking out with her husband, indulging in their nerdoms, which is the collective fan cultures of everything they love, such as Star Wars, Star Trek, Stargate, and Lord of the Rings. Latest reviews number 3 ever since it was announced. Emerald Fennell's version of the torrid Brontë classic has been the subject of furious online discourse over everything from its casting to its costumes, the most controversial film of the year. Usually, that accolade is reserved for an edgy political thriller or a taboo busting horror movie. But the film that is currently prompting the most discourse, to use a polite term for it, is an adaptation of a 19th century novel. Ever since Emerald Fennell declared that she was following Promising Young Woman and Saltburn with her own take on Emily Bronte's Wuthering Heights, commentators have not been short of opinions, mostly negative ones. Fennell has channeled her creative instincts into a disturbing exercise in pointless destruction, wrote Lara Brown in The Spectator, and that was 5 months before the film's release date next week. Everything about the film has been pilloried, from its casting to its costumes, from the actors' accents to the inverted commas around the title. It's Wuthering Heights, not Wuthering Heights, to emphasize that this is Fennell's own interpretation of the book rather than the book itself. The hostility has been relentless. But could the reasons for this hostility go beyond some skepticism about a dodgy-looking period drama? The beginning of the backlash, the first objections were heard in July 2024 when the news broke that someone known for provocative and flashy satires was adapting a revered Victorian classic. Having been a film and television actress, Fennell wrote and directed 2 hits, Promising Young Woman and Saltburn, with the former winning the Oscar for Best Screenplay in 2021, but both films suffered backlashes. Fennell was accused of dealing in style over substance trash, which appeared to tackle serious subjects, sexual assault, class war, only to fall back on snazzy color schemes, cheap twists, and pop hit soundtrack memes. The worry seemed to be that Fennell's Brontë adaptation would be more of the same. The volume of objections increased in September 2024 when Margot Robbie and Jacob Elordi were confirmed as the book's main characters, Cathy and Heathcliff. In the section of Bronte's novel which covers their intense romance, Cathy and Heathcliff are in their teens, whereas Robbie and Elordi are now 35 and 28 respectively. Another factor is that Robbie Barbie herself has kept her straight blonde hair rather than having the brown ringlets mentioned in the novel. More significantly, Heathcliff is said in Wuthering Heights to resemble a dark-skinned gypsy, leading some scholars to propose that he isn't white. For some, it's his non-whiteness that accounts for his being othered and mistreated in the story. Bearing that in mind, could Fennel be accused of whitewashing the character and missing the point by having Elordi as her leading man? The film's casting director, Carmel Cochran, wasn't fazed by the negativity. There was one Instagram comment that said the casting director should be shot, she recalled last April. But you really don't need to be accurate. It's just a book that is not based on real life, it's all art. That may be so, and it's not as if Robbie and Elordi are the first actors to be older and whiter than the Cathy and Heathcliff imagined by Brontë. Laurence Oliver and Merle Oberon were 32 and 28 when the 1939 film of Wuthering Heights came out. But last year's complaints show how much times have changed. Audiences are a lot more sensitive to whitewashing and inauthenticity than they used to be. Besides, in 2011, Andrea Arnold's Wuthering Heights film had a black actor, James Howson, as Heathcliff, while Kaya Scodelario, who played Cathy, was 19 when it was released. To some, the new film's casting looked like a backward step, backwards to 1939 to be precise. Then came last August test screenings. As reported in Word of Real, attendees gave the impression that the story was stripped of emotional nuance and full of salacious detours that serve shock value. These assertions were backed up by the steamy trailer, which went online the following month. Fennel, it seemed, didn't want Wuthering Heights to be any less garish, modern, or sexually frank than Saltburn and Promising Young Woman. In the trailer, Robbie is seen doing some highly suggestive bread making, her cheeks flushed and her bodice heaving as she remembers Elordi's naked torso. Then there are shots of a corset being pulled tight, of Elordi stripping off his shirt, and someone putting their finger in a fish's mouth. A typical response to all this lust and lewdness was an article in the spin-off entitled "Everyone Hates the New Wuthering Heights Trailer, and Here's Why." Fennel is taking a piece of art and reducing it to its dullest form, wrote Claire Maybe. There were plenty of issues aside from the overt eroticism too. The trailer was aggressively anachronistic, with Charlie XCX on the soundtrack, and Cathy wearing a white wedding dress, which, according to Vogue, seemed as though it was more befitting of the 1980s than the early 1800s. And when a clip from the film was released last month, improvements, the actors themselves were derided for being anachronistic. They surely had great dentists back then, said one comment on YouTube. Love Margot, but she looks like she's about to pull an iPhone out at any moment, said another. The reasons for the rank up, but these quibbles raise some big questions. The first one being, so what? Why shouldn't Fennel come up with her own out there sexed up version of Wuthering Heights? If Clueless can put a Jane Austen plot in 1990s California and Baz Luhrmann's Romeo plus Juliet can do the same with Shakespeare, why should we be fussing about dress design? There are two obvious answers, one of them suggested by the fact that in the trailer, Robbie's Cathy sounded posher than any screen character since the toffs in Saltburn. Fennel's last film, Saltburn, was set in a stately home, and one of the best things about it was that the writer-director seemed to know her upper-class characters intimately. There is no mystery as to how she managed it. As the daughter of celebrated jewelry designer Theo Fennel, she grew up in gilded circles. To quote Patrick Sproul in Dazed, not a lot of 18-year-olds have their birthday party photographed by Tatler and attended by a Delavigne, multiple Guinness heirs, several members of the nobility, and the daughter of Sting. In short, Fennel is posh. Indeed, her background is so privileged that when she acted in The Crown as Camilla Parker Bowles, now better known as Queen Camilla, she didn't have to sound any grander than she does in ordinary life. This hasn't endeared her to everyone. As popular as Saltburn was, some reviews argued that it was too forgiving of its posh characters because Fennel was so posh herself. It's a satire that never bares its claws, never lifts a finger to criticize these people, said Sproul. Other people have grumbled that Fennel's connections and advantages gave her directing career an unfair head start. This meant that many commentators were primed to dislike Wuthering Heights from the very beginning. The antipathy had as much to do with their feelings about Fennel as their feelings about the film, more like this, but the main reason behind all the rancor is this: people who love Bronte's novel really love Bronte's novel. They're not just fond of it, they're fixated on it. As Hepzibah Anderson wrote in a BBC article, most of us read Wuthering Heights in our teens, in other words, when we're wildly impressionable. Many of the book's fans go on to view it as part of their identity, and for that matter, as part of their love lives. I remain convinced that the precedent for chasing toxic love stories was one set out for me as a teenager by Heathcliff, confessed Olivia Petter in British Vogue, and she's not alone. Considering how devoted the novel's aficionados are, it was inevitable that any film which diverged from the text would be taken by some as a personal attack. The irony is that Fennell professes to adore the book as much as anyone. At the Brontë Women's Writing Festival last September, she said that she had been obsessed and driven mad by Wuthering Heights since she read it as a 14-year-old. I know that if somebody else made the film, I'd be furious. She's probably not too worried then that other people are furious about her. In fact, she may be quite pleased. Every time new information about the film emerges, there are thousands of impassioned words written about it, and while they aren't all flattering, they have undoubtedly helped to raise awareness and build anticipation. Could Wuthering Heights really be as over the top as the trailers suggest? We asked. Could it be so bad it's good, or could it even be good? Certainly, social media reactions from an early screening have been strong, with one film writer even moved to declare it a god-tier new classic. I personally cannot wait to watch Fennell's Wuthering Heights, wrote Olivia Petter in Vogue. I'll admit, as a dedicated fan of the book, I was skeptical at first, but now I no longer care about accuracy. The old saying about there being no such thing as bad publicity has never been more true. Number 4, one of the most iconic characters in English literature has to be Emily Brontë's Heathcliff from her novel Wuthering Heights. A dark figure who is cruel, bitter, and abusive. The only thing redemptive about this villain is his deep and unshakable love for Catherine Earnshaw, the young girl he grew up with. Though often looked back on as a romantic character, Heathcliff in Wuthering Heights is a wild figure, one who embodies wickedness. This is not a love story. It's a gothic ghost story about revenge, incorporating themes of class and race set on the wild moors of Yorkshire. Knowing all of this, going into Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights proves a jarring, vapid, and ultimately insulting experience. Fennell has made no bones about how her interpretation of Bronte's novel is based on her feelings for the book after reading it at 14. However, after cutting away nearly all the story's characters and only adapting about half of the book, I have to wonder if Fennell has ever actually read the novel she's based her passion project on. Because if you strip this movie of its title and change the characters' names, this isn't anything close to Bronte's story. The first thing that stands out in Wuthering Heights isn't the fact that its most important character is played not by a person of color, but by a white Australian man. It's that Fennell has taken a knife and gutted out some of the most pivotal characters of the book, rewriting the story to the point where it barely resembles the source at all. Wuthering Heights, the novel, hinges heavily on Cathy's brother, Hindley. As the favored child, Hindley grows jealous and bitter. His father-in-law brings home a young orphan from his trip to Liverpool to live with them as an adopted sibling. Named after Mr. Earnshaw's son, who died in childhood, Heathcliff is doted on by his adoptive father, making both Cathy and Hindley deeply jealous and sparking the story's primary conflict. Heathcliff, as an orphan boy with dark skin, has been raised in status monumentally thanks to Mr. Earnshaw, and Hindley deeply resents him for it, resorting to abuse that ultimately makes Heathcliff's life a living hell once Mr. Earnshaw dies. This inspires Heathcliff to seek lifelong vengeance against Hindley, which extends well past Hindley's life and even to their children in the next generation. Recounting the beginning of the book is a necessity because Fennell completely erases Hindley from existence in her film, thereby erasing all the motivation that her Heathcliff Jacob Elordi has to seek vengeance and become the man he is in the book. Instead, her script gives Mr. Earnshaw Martin Clunes many of Hindley's traits. He's abusive, a drunk, and sees Heathcliff more like a charity case than his own son. The problem here is that this also robs the character of one of his most wholesome relationships with his father. Instead, the film focuses on a young Heathcliff, Owen Cooper, and a young Cathy Earnshaw, Charlotte Mellington, instantly forming a bond and finding a kinship in the shadows of Mr. Earnshaw's rage. Rather than the story being one about generational trauma, which is finally dispelled when the children of these characters find happiness and love together, those descendants from the book are also erased. No Kathy Linton, no Linton Heathcliff, and saddest of all, no Hatton Earnshaw. If you are unfamiliar with the novel, this narrative takes up almost half of the book. By robbing the story of these characters, this film can no longer be called Wuthering Heights. Even worse, characters like Nellie Hong Chau, Joseph, Ewan Mitchell, and Isabella Linton, Alison Oliver are completely unrecognizable. Nellie goes from a well meaning servant and quiet observer to a stifled bastard daughter of a lord who seems to harbor deep hate for Kathy. Joseph is transformed from a religiously violent and evil man into a servant who likes a bit of BDSM and ultimately is just sort of there. Worst of all, Isabel turns from a naive innocent without an ounce of cruelty who is tortured by Heathcliff after their marriage into a kinky, obsessive, and mean person. To list the amount of betrayals this film has inflicted on the source material would involve recounting the movie scene by scene, but this is only the tip of the iceberg. Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights is an insult to Heathcliff and Cathy. The most corrupted part of Fennell's Wuthering Heights lies with its core characters. Cathy is first and foremost ill-cast with Margot Robbie in the role. Robbie is too old to play the character, and Kathy is less a wild child with a natural arrogance and defiance and more a whiny rich girl who worries about ruining her skirts if she's placed on a tree branch out on the moors. Rather than giving us tension between Kathy and Heathcliff, the film instantly pairs them together, heavy handed in its reassurance that at every turn they are soulmates. This isn't a toxic love. This is two star-crossed lovers separated by circumstance and a poorly used miscommunication trope. Robbie gives a completely unremarkable performance as Kathy, partially because a woman in her 20s might get away with being a brat, but a woman who appears in her mid 30s is given a lot less slack on that front. The prime example is Oliver's Isabella, who is also a quirky brat given a pass because she is young and naive. But this version of Kathy is also a poor match for Heathcliff, played by a dull Elordi who turns the character into a defaced and distorted schoolboy. The two inanely repeat I love yous to each other for about half of the movie and quickly consummate their relationship, leading to some truly exhausting sex scenes that overstay their welcome. All of this gives the impression that this isn't Heathcliff and Kathy, but Fennell's imagined romantic version of her own fantasies. Obviously, when a filmmaker takes on an adaptation, it's their prerogative to decide how loyal they wish to be to the source material. Stories that follow the source to the letter might be awful, while adaptations that go far off book might end up being masterpieces. Many reactions have compared this film to Baz Luhrmann's gorgeous Romeo plus Juliet, and while the stylistic decisions might reflect Luhrmann's use of color and modern fashion, his movie follows Shakespeare's play to the letter. Wuthering Heights is a botched mismatch of cobbled together scenes more than anything else. The point of an adaptation is to keep the soul of the source alive. Scenes can be changed, characters can be combined or removed, but the heart of the story must remain. Wuthering Heights easily proves it is lacking both heart and soul. Emerald Fennell's Wuthering Heights is visually captivating, but narratively shallow Fennell, who has been praised plenty in the past for her vibrant visual aesthetic in Saltburn and Promising Young Woman, brings that same palette to Wuthering Heights. While the cotton candy colors of Promising Young Woman were a stark contrast to its dark subject matter, and Saltburn indulged in extravagance thanks to the wealth and privilege of its characters, Wuthering Heights is stylistically bold for no reason. If you're looking for a visual feast that bravely utilizes color alongside a story actually worth chewing on, watch Guillermo del Toro's Crimson Peak instead. Atmospherically, Fennell's film tries to imitate that style, but the choices made in production design and costuming are baffling. It's a fever dream of a film, and not in a good way. Excessive use of non-organic textiles like polyester and latex makes the film look cheap. This must have been a creative decision from Fennell, as costume designer Jacqueline Duran has been no stranger to accurate and beautiful period costumes, having won Oscars for Anna Karenina and Little Women. Similarly, production designer Susie Davis, who has worked on projects like Conclave and Mr. Turner, turns the home of Wuthering Heights into rubble while transforming Thrushcross Grange into a clownish carnival. Don't get me wrong, Wuthering Heights is still a beautiful film. Linus Sandgren's cinematography means every scene pops off the screen. Similarly, Anthony Willis's sweeping score accents the wild moors perfectly, though fewer compliments can be lauded to Charlie XCX's contribution. But it's a film that's ultimately hollow, with a bizarre tone that toes the line between surreal and serious. There are purposefully comedic moments that make the story feel almost like a parody, leaning into absurdism, as well as scenes soaked in serious melodrama that weigh everything down. Couple that with the Forever 21 fashion funhouse sets and heavy handed homages to Gone with the Wind, and it's just further proof that this is a soulless adaptation best reserved for Tumblr than the silver screen. Emerald Fennell Poorly made a Harlequin romance, not a literary classic wall. There's a laundry list of mistakes that Fennell makes throughout the film. The largest takeaway is that this is closer to an original story than anything that Emily Brontë ever wrote. Replacing complexity and nuance with melodrama might mask the film enough for those unfamiliar with the book to take it as a romance, given that it lacks the true substance of the original story, a deep understanding of the racial, societal, and class divides between Heathcliff and the other characters. Wuthering Heights is a waste of 2 hours of your time. Fennell has said multiple times in interviews that this is her interpretation of the book, something she's wanted to make for years, but I'd argue there's probably better written Wuthering Heights fanfiction on Archive of Our Own than what's been produced here. Fennell has prided herself on including original dialogue from Bronte's novel, but without the meaningful context, the scenes work as well as putting lipstick on a pig. Analyzing the film on its own, completely disregarding the source, reveals a story that might have been found on the pages of a Harlequin romance novel. But if you think I'm disparaging these other forms of media, this comparison is far more insulting to romance novels and fan fiction than it is to this film. What makes the original Wuthering Heights so powerful is the dizzying story at its core. The Earnshaws and Lintons have a complicated family tree, and Heathcliff comes in like a wrecking ball to blow everything up. On one hand, we want to believe that Heathcliff can change from his wicked ways with enough love from Cathy, but on the other hand, his actions are so cruel that it feels like Bronte is pushing us to the very brink of what is acceptable before ultimately redeeming him in his final moments. Emily Bronte's novel is about characters who are hateful and pitiable, but still full of enough charm and complexity that we are desperate to learn their full messy tale. Emerald Fennell's film is merely telling a shallow story about two people overcoming all obstacles to fall in love, not necessarily awful on paper, but it's an adaptation that feels like a 14-year-old skimmed the book and jumped to her own conclusions without any true understanding of the novel. Wuthering Heights debuts in theaters on February 13. Number 5, it does not take long into Wuthering Heights, Emerald Fennell's adaptation of Emily Bronte's English lit classic, for one to detect the filmmaker's true faith. It is not to the challenging and beloved Gothic novel of emotional repression and inheritance. As with many other cinematic adaptations, Fennell dispenses with the unruly latter half of the book, along with most of its conventions. In Fennell's emphatically maximalist vision, she has explained that the quotation marks in the film's marketing are a note of humility to her singular and limited interpretation. The tortuously connected Cathy Margot Robbie and Heathcliff Jacob Elordi swoon about the Yorkshire moors in extravagant, anachronistic formal wear, flagrantly unbound by period decorum. Over 3 features, the English writer-director has demonstrated a penchant for sticky visuals. Arguably the most discussed scene from 2023's Saltburn, her discourse-driving sophomore feature, involved the licking of cummy bathwater from the drain. Wuthering Heights is not to be controversially outsoaked. In close-up, sweat beads and drips down a spine, snail slime indolently streaks a window, freshly poured pig blood mugs Cathy's dress. Desire, less suggested than enforced, stains everything. Early in the film, just after the abrupt aging of Cathy and Heathcliff from Boundless Children, played by Charlotte Mellington, and adolescence's Owen Cooper, to unspecific adults Elordi's brooding, beastly Heathcliff catches Robbie's blonde Cathy furiously horny after a bit of light voyeurism, pleasuring herself against the windswept rocks. She tries to hide her hand in her dress. He picks her up by the body strings and licks her fingers clean. Erotic mileage for this will vary, as it does with any Fennel project. The director's compulsion to induce shock by whatever loud lux means necessary has proven reliably divisive, though her bankable notoriety seems perhaps more polarizing than her actual work, which undeniably speaks to our vibes forward, hit seeking visual culture. I met this brazen play for the lizard brain as I did much of the callowly shocking Saltburn, with part jolt, part admiration in this sexless slop age. At least someone is trying, and an eye roll. There is visual pleasure, of course, in seeing two beautiful people contort themselves into postures of florid desire, the titillation of fingers and mouths and skin. But this lustful vibe felt curiously muted and chilly, and not because of the persistent Yorkshire mist. We have only just met the adult pair, with no sense of their intervening years. Robbie, a mature actor in her mid 30s, plays Kathy, who is 15 on the page, as if she has just discovered sexual pleasure. Wide eyed and petulant, naive and yet fully formed, she is an uncanny mix of woman and girl without much history. Like, say, a life size doll. And that's before Kathy plays Little Dollhouse in the ostentatious wealth afforded by her marriage to Shahzad Latif's Mr. Linton, a loveless Baroque fantasyland replete with lacquered floors and walls colored to her skin. Robbie's agile performance, her sui generis emotions in extremis, cannot cover the flatness of the written character. Amid such exuberant excess, she pales. That's par for the course for Fennell, whose lavish and genuinely prolific visual imagination has never extended to the realm of character. I was flummoxed by her 2020 debut Promising Young Woman, a noxious jawbreaker which coated a dimensionless black core of misogyny with a pastel sheen and netted Fennell a Best Original Screenplay Oscar. That film, born of pop Me Too rage, squandered an excellent premise and performance from Carey Mulligan into a single annihilating dead-ending obsession for rape revenge. I was both momentarily entranced and put off by Saltburn, which sacrificed any character coherence or muddled class commentary for moments of juvenile psychosexual shocks that felt tailor-made to provoke a Puritan outrage cycle. In Wuthering Heights, Fennell makes no pretense of social commentary. This is, to quote Vulture's Alison Wilmore, a work of smooth-brained sensuality about two messy people who won't quit each other that makes for arguably Fennell's dumbest and thus best movie, though it is no less frustrating. For lurking just beneath the film's slippery, stylish surface is a familiar lack of interest in its female characters. Alternately haughty and horny, beseeching and cruel, Kathy is either one-dimensional victim or villain at will, a vessel of the film's gaudy tableaus. Her longtime companion Nellie, Hong Cho, bears the brunt of her scorn. A fascinatingly unreliable narrator in the book, Fennell reduces Nellie, explained here as the bastard daughter of another landlord hired to serve Kathy, to merely conniving spectator, her motivations compressed to base jealousy and bitter resentment. Worst of all is Linton's sister, Isabella, Alison Oliver, a simpering, daft creature fixated on dolls and ribbons. Oliver is by far the funniest part of the movie, but there's a sinister shade to her infantile mannerisms and obsequious devotion to Heathcliff. Fennell, in typical blunt fashion, literalizes the book's dom sub valence to their relationship with a dog collar. Isabella epitomizes the film's strikingly dim view of its women, who are rudderless, rash, and, with the exception of Nellie, hopelessly entranced by Heathcliff. Upon learning of his marriage to Isabella, Kathy pouts. "He's mine," she petulantly cries, not because she loves him, but because she named him as a child. These are indeed childish characters, and not in definitionally petty way, though they are that too. Literally childish in that they embody the crude, totalizing emotions of adolescence. Perhaps Fennell is attempting to convey the extreme societal constrictions on 19th century women. Perhaps she is interested in how thwarted desire blunts our faculties, can turn even the sharpest of us into strange, strung out creatures. But I detected once again Fennell's uncanny and seemingly unknowing knack for pop culture titillation, for commercial if not cinematic benefit, namely the persistent fixation with girlhood, identifying with and returning to prolonged adolescence. Wuthering Heights strains for adult passions and postures with the conviction of a teenager stuffing her mother's bra. For all its aesthetic excess, and though I may not agree with Fennell's vision, I will defend its intemperance. There's a strange small mindedness to this adaptation, a failure of romantic imagination. I am as susceptible as anyone to overwhelming loudness for being so smacked in the face with sublime audiovisual stimulation that it turns my brain off. Coincidentally, the best music by Charlie XGX, who composed the film Soaring, Synthy soundtrack does this in spades, and I include the movie opener House in that. But the problem with hinging a film on self destructive eroticism is that it requires a self to destruct, the messy, confusing, contradictory substance of desire. Otherwise, it's just dress up. Number 6, the upcoming Wuthering Heights movie, set to release on Valentine's Day 2026, has not even premiered yet, but is already causing major controversy among fans, teachers and film critics. Directed by Emerald Fennell, the film stars Margot Robbie as Catherine Earnshaw and Jacob Elordi as Heathcliff in a modern retelling of Emily Bronte's 1847 novel. The movie promises passion, heartbreak, and chaos. However, audiences cannot seem to agree whether it is a true adaptation or just loosely inspired by the book. From the moment the first trailer dropped in September, social media lit up with debates over how closely the movie sticks to the novel. Some say it is clearly a new interpretation, while others argue that if it carries the title Wuthering Heights, it should stay loyal to Bronte's story. Fennell has said to describe her film as being loosely inspired by the original, being more of a psychological dreamscape than a period drama. The idea has split fans into two sides: traditional book lovers and modern film enthusiasts. Meanwhile, fans of Robbie and Elordi, both known for their intense screen presence, argue that the film's bold approach is what makes it special. Some believe that the movie is a more exemplified version of the book, emphasizing the feeling of the chaos of love. The divide between classic literature fans and modern moviegoers is growing online. Book Talk is filled with reactions dissecting every frame of the trailer, while fans celebrate the casting and the film's dark, seductive tone. Some literary critics worry that Fennell's interpretation focuses too much on aesthetic and romance, leaving out the deeper social and psychological struggles in the book, such as revenge, class, and obsession. The original story is described as being about how destructive love can be. The book is not a fantasy but a warning of what love can do to people. Many English teachers on social media share their fear that the movie will lose its impact. Bronte's Wuthering Heights is known for its gothic tone, tragic love, and moral complexity, but translating that to film has always been a challenge. Some critics say this adaptation looks more like a dark romance thriller than a faithful retelling. Still, Fennell and her team defend the changes, attempting to emphasize that passion and cruelty can coexist, as described in an interview with Entertainment Weekly. That approach is not new. Over the years, Wuthering Heights has been adapted dozens of times. From the 1939 black and white version starring Laurence Olivier to Andrea Arnold's 2011 version, which emphasized racial and class tension. Fennell's film, though, looks set to be the boldest yet, combining historical inspiration with modern cinematic style. If one thing unites fans on both sides, it's the remix of Charlie XCX's song Everything is Romantic, featuring Caroline Polachek, that plays in the movie trailer. The moody, distorted beat has become a viral hit on TikTok, with fans calling it the perfect soundtrack for heartbreak. The remix, incorporating electronic sounds with gothic strings, captures the movie's tone of both romance and discomfort. It really connects Fennell's new take with the original book, highlighting that feeling of falling in love and falling apart at the same time. The song's popularity has helped fuel hype for the movie, even among people who have never read the novel. TikTok edits featuring Robbie and Elordi in the trailer's Foggy Moor scenes have racked up millions of views. Part of what is making this movie so controversial is how it bridges two very different audiences. For older readers and teachers, Wuthering Heights is a cornerstone of classic literature. For younger fans, it is a dramatic love story being reimagined for a new generation. Every time a book becomes a movie, people argue about some aspect of it. But movies are not books, they are experiences. You cannot fit every chapter into 2 hours. Wuthering Heights is famously hard to adapt. With its layered narrators, time jumps, and tragic themes, no film has ever fully captured its complexity. Fennel's version seems to embrace that challenge by creating something both familiar and fresh. In the end, the real power of this new version reminds people that love, art, and storytelling still have the power to divide and connect viewers all at once. And if the viral soundtrack is any clue, this Valentine's Day might belong less to Cupid and more to chaos. Haley Raymond is an arts and culture editor for the Wessex Wire. Her favorite season is fall because Halloween is the best thing to ever exist. If you can't reach her on any platform whatsoever, she's most likely ignoring the world with a book in her hand, blasting music. FYI, movie recommendations are fully welcome because movies are awesome. Fun fact, she apparently plays the drums. I think